and gradually they feel more open to doing more, and so people really dive in and just, have at it with the app. It just kind of really depends on the people. I think that's, we'll talk a little bit more about professional learning, but that whole network is really important. So if you can orchestrate some sort of play dates or some ways in which people can feel connected, I think that'll help to move people together, because it's really about building that kind of playful learning about tech community, and there will be the spectrum.
I think that's a great idea, because several people in their pre-assignment said that when they went on the app, they didn't really know what to do. And actually, I found that. But if you would be working in a group, there would be people there who would be like, oh, well, do this and do this that you may not think about as you're just playing with it by yourself. So I think that is a great suggestion to have some play dates.
All the time. And if they have children, I would say have their children play with them and look at them and they play with their kids. Like, I know because everyone is in the classroom, or but if they have access to kids, that's one way that, I don't have children, but I have nieces, I have cousins, and I let them use apps if I don't really feel familiar with it.
Right. And it was interesting because I do have my Mia, who is 7. She played with some, and she gets bored a lot of times really quick. So
I think that's an interesting little sidebar of this whole conversation, because in many ways the apps have been designed for just moments of interaction versus engaged extended interaction. So that's an interesting kind of thing for us to think about as we think about what good design is the idea just to give the child a quick pass by and then on to something else, or what does it take to go past that? It's interesting to think about.
That is a great point, because if their intent is just that initial few minutes of contact, it worked.
Yep.
And that may have been their whole objective. And one of the things that I struggle with, and this just might be my age, but a lot of the apps I'm thinking, okay, now what should I be learning from this? Like the question I had with SoundBrush, I don't know what I learned about music, except that I could make some sounds, and if I went lower, you could do those kinds of things, and it did have the 8th note and 16th note, so you could hear it go faster. And maybe that is all you learn, but I just think, okay, now, if I were with young kids and wanting them to know more about music, what would this be teaching them?
I think it's so much about the context and about the adults. We talk about that a lot, who's using it. So, for instance, SoundBrush may resonate more, and especially when we're talking about families and curriculum, if someone's interested in music, or a family is a musical family, then they may be more interested in something and playing with sound, playing with different instruments, playing with note, having that conversation. It's not just about looking at the app as this isolated experience, and I hope that was conveyed. And the webinar that we did before, as well as the workshop, is it has to really be used in context and be thoughtful. And I think it can be interesting to have that conversation, but it doesn't work for everyone. It's really about finding what works best for the objective of either for the parent or for the teacher.
What's interesting about SoundBrush for me, just as a category of apps that are interesting, is that it allows the child to do something they can't do otherwise, and I think that's that's the novelty, that's the power of the device and of the app. Is you can't move your brush around and create sound. So I'm not sure it's deeper than that, other than the kind of the aha moment where the child realizes that by doing something, something else happens. And I think Warren, if he was here, would say that's an important part of early entry apps. Is just that the child realizes they're in control, and that what they do leads to something on screen or that they hear. But I think that in our own thinking, in the evolution of our own thinking, we're a lot less interested in kind of one-off apps for a quick experience than we are in either an integrated use of a series of apps or open-ended apps that teachers and kids can tell stories with or do something else with. I think the app market is maturing, but we're still seeing a lot out there that's not so great. And there's something about the 99 cents that's kind of a throwaway that makes it an interesting dynamic for the developers because they want you to buy it. So it has to be enticing enough to buy, but does it have to be enticing enough to then be played with a lot for the parent to think, well, that was worth 99 cents.
Right.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic. I think we've got an economy that's completely different in apps, and it's driving some of these decisions. But then you get someone like a Tokaboka who not only wants you to engage in whatever app you're playing with, wants you to come back and be part of Tokaboka, knowing that Tokaboka experiences are going to be interesting. They want you to become, a long-term consumer and player, not just one-off. So, I think there are different strategies.
Well, and Amanda, your comment about understanding or thinking about context, actually I hadn't put it quite like that in my mind, but you're right. It does depend upon the context of what you're doing with the app and what you're thinking about.
I think that's some interesting conversations that can happen with SoundBrush, especially if you have a group of children who are interested, and it really takes the adult kind of being a facilitator. I think that's one of the interesting things about that is that there is that ability to be creative and to ask questions and to see if you can make something different. That to me is like the intriguing part about it. One logistical question I want to just verify: can they chat in the box? I just wanted to verify if they could or couldn't, because we have a few questions, but I could pose that to the group just as a reflective question, but I wasn't sure if they could chat, like type in something in the chat.
They cannot.
Okay, that's what I thought.
John, I remembered that from the last time, yeah.
Yeah. I just wanted to check. So they'll have some little thoughtful, reflective questions to ask as we're going through.
Okay. Yeah, it must be the type of contract we have with GoToWebinar Centrics.
Yeah.
I have a chat box, but the regular attendees do not.
Yeah. We, Michael Robb from the Rogers Center and I did a webinar for a group here in Illinois a week or two ago, and he was in Connecticut and I was here, and they were all over, so that's kind of a fun use of the technology. But the back channel, the conversation going on in the chat box was really rich, and Mike and I, because we kind of divided the presentation in half, were able to join the conversation in the back channel when the other person was presenting. And I've never done that before. I've always watched the questions go by, and then you say so-and-so asked a good question. But to literally jump in and to know each other's content well enough that I could comment on what Mike was saying as he was saying it if someone had a question was really rich. I think these were fairly experienced webinar attendees, so they knew what they were doing. And they immediately jumped into the back channel as more than, "Hi, this is Mary from Bloomington," and went right to exchanging ideas. So pretty exciting to see it when it connects and when people get excited about it. That's good.
Do you know what platform that was?
Yeah, Adobe Connect.
Okay.
They're on a platform that's more typically found in higher education.
Okay.
We're on WebEx here when we do our own, and we've done others on GoToWebinar.
And WebEx, you can have a back channel also, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And part of that is really what Amanda was asking, is prompting that, knowing it's there, but then really kind of seeding it by asking a question and really asking people to jump in and start to exchange ideas. It starts a little slow at first if people haven't done it before, but then it can pick up. The other thing is that you have the transcript of that conversation too at the end, which is really valuable. You can go back and see whose question did we not answer, or what was really coming through as a hot topic.
And what I have found when I've been a part of a webinar that has a back channel is just the references to different websites. Yep. I mean, that is incredible. So
that's really, to me, that's why Twitter matters to me, because it's not 140 characters about what you're doing today, but it's 140 characters with a link to an article you just read that I hadn't found yet and didn't even know was out there, or a piece of research. If you follow people like Amanda and I follow folks that are into this tech and young children space, it's like having a virtual search engine. People find stuff, and we find stuff and share it back. That's the kind of the ethos is everybody finds stuff. But I agree. Those links are so powerful, and I can take a look and go, oh, you know, that's not really relevant.
Right.
Or, wow, am I glad I know about that one.
Right.
So, yeah, I think we're learning how to use these tools more effectively.
Because it takes a long time to search. You know, that's one of the things with the apps. It was kind of like shopping for me, and I'm not a shopper. I don't like it. I get tired of it really quick.
Yep.
So if you have the connects with experts that have been looking at these things,
yep,
you don't have to do all that. So.
Yeah, and you develop a level of trust or confidence in other Twitter colleagues who, you know, always post great stuff. So you're always going to pay attention, and you want in your own conversation group to become one of those trusted people as well, so that people see you and maybe come back to your site or go to Facebook or whatever. But yeah, I think it's pretty powerful when it's very intentional and an interesting way to share that doesn't take a lot of time.
Right.
Just, geez, I was thinking about all of you, and I just read this article, and you might all be interested. So there's a curation going on there, right, which Amanda's going to talk about. But that idea of, you know, I've decided this one is worthy of the whole group. Of the 10 articles I read this week, here's the one everybody ought to know about. So people are curating to begin with, and then on the receiving end, you're doing the same thing, deciding if it's relevant or not.
Right. Well, it is 9 o'clock, so we're going to get started. I just want to say to you both, Chip and Amanda, how much I have appreciated the first webinar, and then Amanda with us in February. Really has been very helpful for us to start our conversation and to promote our thinking about technology and how we're going to help the child care providers and parents in Tennessee. I have gotten some evaluations back from our February training, and I'll be sending those out to you soon, but they've really been very positive. And I have been very pleased with what has happened, and I look forward to our next hour with you, and just want to thank you for all the work that you're doing, and that you really made it possible for this to happen. And you did make it possible. You worked within our budget, and you've done really everything I could have asked. So thank you.
Great. Thanks. We've enjoyed the opportunity.
And I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay.
Great. So welcome everyone to our second webinar. Host Amanda in Tennessee. Thanks for coming back. Today we'll be talking about Media Manager, Mediator, Mentor, and Maker. So these are the 4 M roles that we mentioned before in the pre-webinar. You did a little bit of it, though you didn't know it possibly at the workshop that we had in Tennessee, and so then we'll just kind of wrap up and give you some ideas and some tips to consider when you're going through these 4 M roles as well as your own professional learning.
Yeah, and the beauty of the M roles is they're M roles we want you to embrace, and then they're M roles that we want you to model and help educators embrace. So there's really a nice little flow through here. If we all become 4M media people, then we can help parents move in that direction, and we can, in the work that you're setting out to do, we can have an impact on the teachers. There we go.
So first, when you're thinking about overall what do educators need in order to for you to help support them in their role with their digital media literacy, we want to continue those thoughts about digital media literacy. So at the workshop, I talked about the attitudes, knowledge, experience, competency, and fluency, and I talked about that in the context of families, but we also want to think about that in the context of educators and how we're supporting that. We also want to think about child development, developmentally appropriate practice, and family and culture, and how all those pieces work together to help support the use of technology and digital media. We want to think about the 4 C's, which we talked about: context, context, and child, and we talked about that really thoroughly in our pre-webinar. Today we're going to talk about the 4 M's of digital leadership, so being a manager, mediator, mentor, and maker. The 5 E's of technology integration, which are kind of more of a continuum of looking at tech integration from exchange, enriching, enhancing the experience, extending, and then empowering the experience of the learning. We also want to think about pre-service, in-service, and professional development, and all those different spectrums and how they fit, and how the work that you're doing is helping to support all of those different facets, as well as providing your own professional development. 2, hands-on playtime and tech play groups. We talked about that thoroughly. You were a tech play group. Yay! We were never going to say that. Continuing that play experience. The pre-assignment for this webinar was also a play experience, so having time to do technology. And Mary Lou and I were just talking about maybe even doing a tech play group with the Tennessee CCRNR, so maybe you can start your own so that you can work together. And that allows you to use technology so that you learn how to use technology, and then you can support educators and parents use technology. So research effective practices. I share with you a lot of links at the workshop, as well as you have our website, which has and curates a lot of information. And also thinking about the effective, appropriate, and intentional use of technology for young children, with parents, with families, with other educators. I felt like that was really stressed, and all the work that we continue to do can also be stressed today as well. And then the connected learning, and we're really going to talk a little bit more about that in depth of what it's like to be a connected educator.
Amanda, let me just jump before we go to the next slide. Right in the middle where it says pre-service, in-service, and professional development. Again, a little gentle nudge to all of us. If you train child care educators, then you are in this business. Then you've got to get your own game up to speed, because how do you train the next generation of teachers of young children if we don't know how to use these tools ourselves? So I'm really calling out my colleagues here at Erickson and my colleagues as teacher educators, which I've been my whole career. And you know, we actually can't sit on the sidelines in this digital age. We have to jump in and figure out for ourselves how to do this, so that then we can help prepare teachers in a positive way. I think that's a Matt has heard me on this stuff before, but I think actually it has the potential to be one of the biggest barriers to good integration, is that we're not preparing teachers to think about integration, because those of us who prepare the teachers aren't thinking about it or don't feel confident in it. So anyway, a little nudge for all of us to keep moving.
Yeah. So just a question for you to think about. 21st century educators equal 21st century learners. And so I want you to think about the types of 21st century tools you use right now to build your professional learning network. I know I had to use today's Meet as one example to get you going, but I also talked about Twitter. And so for you to really think about how are you using these tools and what are you using. In the examples we see a computer, as well as we see Twitter being used to support professional learning, and we want to think about how all of that fits together.
And this headline here, the banner, 21st century educator needs to be a 21st century learner. So here's a circular concept for you. Before we can support 21st century learners, the children and the parents who we work with, we've got to learn how to learn in the 21st century so that then we can become 21st century teachers and educators. And that sounds like we're running in a circle, but in a way it is. We've got to be both, and I think it's a great opportunity. I'm not intimidated by what I don't know about 21st century learning. I'm loving learning more about it every day. So we really believe that being a 21st century learner matters in your work and for those that you work with. We really live in this learn everywhere all the time environment now. Think about that. learn with anyone at any time about anything on any device is really a powerful idea. You're always a learner 24/7. Now that can also be, oh yeah, I'm always a learner 24/7, and I never get to stop. But you know what I'm trying to say there is that access to information and learning and connections to others is always available in this new age. That changes the paradigm of how we think about learning. Let the digital experts teach you. So who are the digital experts? Well, 4-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 2-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 10-year-olds. Let the children who have been born in the digital age, which we were not, none of us were, show us the way. And there's a great kind of reverse teachable moment opportunity here where the teacher can say to the child, I don't know how to do that on the iPad, would you show me? And the empowerment that comes to the child who gets to be the one who shows, right? So I think we sometimes are reluctant to admit to children in the classroom that we don't know or don't have an answer. I think this is a great opportunity to say, hey, we're all learning about it. Let's go to somebody who knows. I love this notion of lifelong and life-wide learning. We've talked about lifelong learning forever. We get what that is, but I think in this digital age, we also have this notion of life-wide across your interests. So it's personal, it's professional, it's things you like to do, travel you take, whatever it is that you're doing across your life in these different ways and using different technologies is part of that life-wide learning. And the opportunity to tap into that for yourself, but for those you work with as well, I think is really, really important. The gap between personal and professional, which comes 2 bullets down, is really narrow for a lot of us where, you know, I'm on Facebook as a professional, I'm on Facebook as personally, and those 2 things have started to intersect in some interesting ways when I'm intentional about that. Formal and informal, well that's also been a big part of the conversation. Formal education in a classroom for young children, but informal learning that's taking place at libraries and museums and zoos and nature centers and out-of-school time programs. We think everybody's in. All of us who are the adults who care about the children and prepare people to care about children are in the conversation, and it's really a rich opportunity to break down that barrier. I really am starting to try to find better words than formal and informal, because informal somehow sounds like a lesser thing, but really it's wherever young children are learning, and there are adults present, and those adults are people we want in this conversation. Social and connected, well again we mentioned, Amanda mentioned Twitter, I mentioned Facebook. We were talking earlier about how we're using Twitter. So this social media connections, whatever it is you do, Pinterest, LinkedIn, it doesn't matter really to me what you're doing. It's that you're out there figuring out how this works. I don't care much about whether it's Facebook or something else. What I care about is the process, the motivation to share, the process of connecting, the excitement of knowing that somebody liked what you posted, and so that gets you to post again, the discovery of some long-lost friend because they found you there. I mean, this is all really powerful, and it's not disconnected at all from what we're talking about. It's powerfully connected. And then last, of course, is digital media literacy, and this is probably the 13,000th time we've said that phrase to you since this began. But maybe because we really think that's the bedrock, that's the whole deal, right? As we gain digital media literacy, we gain the competencies to help others do the same. In the 21st century, we want learning that's active, that's relevant, that's real world, it's effective, it's hands-on, it's networked, inquiry-based, innovative, personal, transformative. A lot of big words there. Sometimes we're happy if we get one of those words achieved in a training or an interaction, but I think we're raising the bar here for you. We think there's opportunities because these tools open up new ways to be both a learner and an educator. So we talked about lifelong and and life-wide. This learn with anyone, anytime, anywhere, on any device, I think is the biggest idea of the digital age, and really powerful. Again, blending formal and informal, providing mobile access to on-demand and just-in-time learning. I think these are really big ideas that come out of kind of corporate training. But so let me explain. On-demand is I need to know how to get to the movie theater. So I go to Google Maps and I find out how to get to the movie theater. That was on-demand information. I went to request a specific information. I got it, and I was able to do what I needed to do. So that's a personal example, but you certainly can do the same thing when you're needing an answer for your professional life. And just-in-time is a really powerful learning idea. The concept is that if I provide you with the information you need right when you need it, right? Right when you're trying to use it and don't know how, that's going to be the most valuable learning, and you're more likely to, one, to integrate it into your practice, and two, to remember it, which is very different than learning about it in a class in college, and now many years later I'm trying to remember who Piaget was and what that meant, right? So I think that's really interesting to think about. Open information and free education, it's amazing that the world is blowing wide apart. We actually started our conversations before we joined all of you talking about open access to these materials and other things. It's a powerful world we live in. It's all out there. We can go get it. Social learning, professional learning, we talked about. Connecting personally and professionally, again, that those differences are graying. I really like this last one. Are you leaning back or are you leaning in? And the idea of that metaphor is if you're leaning back from the learning, you're just letting it wave over you. You're a consumer. It's just coming in. If you're leaning in, you're engaged, you care, you're interested, you want to know what else we can do. This is an old line from Apple, but I think it's really powerful. Now we can watch a newspaper, listen to a magazine, and see a phone call. So the paradigms are all changed. You know, the way we used to learn and the way we used to access information, we've got new ways now. One quick thing before I pops out of my head, the on-demand learning. If I ask all of you a question, odds are we're all going to Google, because that's where we go. Go to Google, find the answer. If you ask a teenager or a 10-year-old how to find an answer, they're going to YouTube. They're not going to Google at all. They want to see it. And I think that's another powerful indicator of a change. Visual learning and the ability to go and see someone do it so that I can learn how to do it is really powerful. So social learning, again, we've talked about, we just took through a couple of things. This participatory culture is all about, it's not enough to be a lurker. People have to contribute, they have to jump in, they have to engage, and we kind of have an expectation about that. And once you're on Facebook, the expectation isn't just that you'll read other people's posts, but that you'll add something or you'll comment. So that's there. Peer-to-peer learning is really kind of at the heart of my adult learning belief system. It's about adults teaching adults, teachers teaching teachers, parents teaching parents. So how do we learn from others who do the same things or care about the same things as we do? User-contributed content is a huge shift for higher education and online learning, which is my day job around here, which is the notion that the user has something of value to share with the community, and then therefore we have to enable, either through technology or another way, for you to tell your story or share your video or share a document. And so that idea that when the course began, none of that was in the course, but as the course goes on or the training goes on, then people are putting in their own resources. Again, pretty powerful. Why is it that when we go to Amazon.com to buy a book or a product, we're in today's world more swayed by the number of stars it has than we are about a rating that might have come from a professional book reviewer? It's because this user-contributed content. The people who are rating, we're betting, we're hedging our bets, but we're betting that person who gave it a 4 is more like me than the professional person who rates movies all the time. And then so rankings and reviews start to become the user-contributed part of that, right? So if, in fact, you went and looked at something that was rated and made a choice, and then went back on Netflix or somewhere else and rated it yourself, then you've contributed content to the process. Crowdsourcing is this notion of kind of asking a question and having everybody in the crowd answer, and then communities of interest and practice we've talked about a lot. So I think we've kind of got that. I'll just wrap up this piece with this notion that we're wired to connect. We're in a relationship-based industry. One of the reasons technology integration has been slow to find its place in early childhood is because we fundamentally think it's about human relationships, not about relationships via technology. And so that's changing now. We have new tools. We can communicate, collaborate, just like we're doing right now. We have social media that's penetrated our lives in lots of ways. It's always on. It's ubiquitous. It's around us all the time. Low barrier to entry. People can just sign up for free and get started. It's transformed how we work, how we communicate, how we collaborate. We really are doing things in new and interesting ways. Yes, we have a lot to learn still, and yes, we need to nudge ourselves a bit more, but we're moving in interesting ways. I love this notion of once you're online, the world of early childhood education is at your fingertips. You can learn about child care and early childhood education all over the world. You can have relationships from all over the world. You can learn from people from different cultures and countries, and that's, again, this idea that the technology actually makes the world much smaller and much more connected is, again, a powerful idea. So I'll leave you with, it's not about plugging into devices, it's about being plugged in to each other, and that's a great reminder. It isn't the technology, right? It's about the connections. Okay.
So it's about the relationship.
Yeah.
So just some ideas of how to stay connected. So we talked about Facebook, Twitter. There's also LinkedIn, Pinterest. A lot of programs actually use Pinterest to keep parents updated on what's happening at their program. So if you know some centers, and I think we talked a little bit about that in our workshop about how Pinterest is used. Skype obviously is used to connect with people around the world. YouTube, as Chip was saying before, it has a lot of visual, a lot of how-to videos, a lot of information available to us. Google Plus, where you can also have your social network, share information, have your email if you have a Google account. It just streamlines pretty much a lot of data. Wikipedia, we were talking about user-contributed information. Great example of that. and using each other to vet through information to make sure that it's accurate. I remember watching a news piece on one of the founders of Wikipedia, and he was talking about how the user contributed makes it a reliable source of data because everyone's checking everything, and it was very, I mean, obviously it's not an encyclopedia in that sense, but it does the users be able to manifest and kind of mold the ecosystem, which is kind of an interesting dynamic. And then Digo is another tool, which is like a social bookmarking tool. So if you have information that you found on different websites and you want to tag it, you can use that. Macy's Tech and Young Children Interest Forum has a Digo page in which they tag different pieces, and really thinking about how do these tools help us to connect. And so Chip was saying before, we're thinking about relationships and how can this help for us to build our professional learning network, whether it's through LinkedIn or maybe we log into #ACE Tech Chat or we do tech early years. It's really how we're using it strategically, just as we want to help parents and professionals be intentional about the use of technology. We also want to be intentional about the use of it for our professional learning.
Mm-hmm.
So here's a quick example. I'm not sure if you've been able to see this video. It was posted by one of our colleagues at McCormick Center for Early Childhood Leadership, and she basically talks about how Twitter, she uses that as a way of advocacy and her own personal journey for that. So we're going to show a little bit of this clip. It may take just a second for it to load and for us to get back to it. There we go. So I'm assuming you can see it. It's this box here. So I'm just going to press.
Have you ever had an aha moment that shook you out of your socks a bit and shifted the way you were thinking about something? Well, let me share one of mine as it relates to advocacy and its link to technology. Though the word technology appears in my job title, I've never been one quick to jump to the next new tech app as it enters the scene. Most of the time, I'd rather the cyber critics and the tech gurus do the vetting process for me. And then, once the bugs are ironed out and the tool has proved its usefulness, I jump on board. So, when Twitter was introduced to the world, I was like many of you. I asked myself, why does the world need one more way for my friends to share their latest meal photo or my cousins to show off their most recent mug of their cat? But the buzz was hot, and so, a bit reluctantly at first, I created an account. And for a long time, I just watched to see what might come about, watching for the moment when this tool with its quirky 140 characters might prove its value to my day-to-day work. I started to follow some folks talking about things that interested me professionally.
So she goes on to talk, and so I don't want to play the whole video for you, but I kind of wanted you to get a snapshot of kind of her journey into using Twitter. And if you watch the rest of the video, she really talks about how she used it and how she found it helpful for advocacy. And one story I like to share for my own self personally is that we were in a chat group, ECE Tech Chat, very often. And so in 2012, we had the NAOIC Tech Playdate, which we helped to organize. And I remember the first time I met my colleague Maggie Powers, which I often talked about in the workshop and used some of her videos as an example. And so I knew her because of Twitter, because we were always chatting, and then I would randomly follow her links, and we would kind of do that. And then I saw her in person, and I was like, "You're Maggie!" She was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Hey, I'm Amanda." And it was just a great experience where we have this relationship where even now we have ISTE things, and when she lives in Philadelphia, and we find ways to stay connected. We use Facebook, and so we know each other's personal life as well as professional life, but it's really that whole idea of building that relationship, but it's that intentionality, and you can find someone of common interest and a common passion.
I'll just add to Amanda's story, same event. How many of us entered the room and knew who each other was? We'd never met, but you know, we knew them and their ideas and what they thought about and valued, and that's the power of this, right? Yeah. It's not just that I shared a link; it's that you begin to know what people care about because of what they share. And so here's a bunch of tech forward-thinking group, a pretty techie group. We love all this stuff, and we had the aha moment of, wow, we're finally meeting in person. That was great.
Yeah, that was lovely. So when we were going to think about that, just what are your thoughts about CARE's Connect Educator journey and really watching that, and how has it helped to enhance your learning and your professional role, and looking at her as an example that it's okay. She started very hesitant, and then found a way to embrace it and found a use for it, and that it's okay no matter where you are on this spectrum, as long as you keep going and still figure out how you can use these tools to support your learning.
So we've made the case. Sorry, no turning back. You have to become a connected educator. It matters. It matters to your own work, and it really matters to this work you're undertaking to mentor others in Tennessee around how to use these tools well. And so every little strategy on this slide really is a strategy we hope you will pass along, that you will model, but also share with others. So the first one is to just jump in. I don't know how many times I've seen early childhood people kind of around the edges, and I don't really know, and I don't know how to do it, and I think that's the opposite of what the digital age kids do. They just jump in. They just click something and see what happens, right? But we're very cautious about that. But just try something. You don't have to try everything. Try something. Understand that your smartphone, this little device here, can be the key to all of the things we've been talking about. Here's your 24/7 connection to learning, to other people, to social networking. Think about how you can use that tool, not just professionally, not just to get directions to the movie theater, but to really connect with others. This next one I think is important. Set aside some time to get connected and to stay connected. Social media takes time, and some of social media can take tons of time. And sometimes you can set aside time and go, I can't keep going. What I had to learn, this is Chip's moment of honesty here, when I began doing this, I felt like I had to read everything everybody posted, every tweet, everything. I was going to miss something really important. What I've realized since then is, one, I don't have the time to read everything. Two, if it was important, somebody else will share it again, and it'll come back around. Or, it couldn't have been that important, or I would have found it some other way. I'm just giving myself permission to go in when I have time and to connect when I have time, but to not have this feel overwhelmed by this. Here's a really simple one. Please, please, please pass this along as a tip from you as well. Just try something new each month. One thing. One new tech tool, one new app, one new way of using a tech tool, just something that you can say at the end of the month, okay, here's what I tried. And then if you formed your technology play group, then here's what I tried, here's what Amanda tried. Oh, I didn't know about that one, right? And you start to compare. We have teachers doing play groups in schools who are learning lots of apps, not because they all have time to look at 10 new apps, but because they've got people looking at a new one and sharing it. So really be strategic about that. And Amanda started by saying, in the work you're doing, the opportunity to create your own play group here on the early end of this would be a great way to model that. Follow like-minded people is exactly what we were talking about around Twitter. Follow people that are interested in the same things you are, and you will begin to meet other people who are interested, and you'll add them, and your network will grow, but you'll also begin to have a voice in that conversation. Share your story. So this is the contributor moment, the user contributed content, right? It takes some courage to share your story in a social media environment the first time. Because what if nobody likes it? Or what if somebody criticizes you? Or what if I say it and I don't know if anybody ever paid attention, right? It can feel intimidating. Just share your story. What we've learned around this technology thing is that it's really story that's driving this. It's really narrative that's driving this. It's really Amanda's story, Chip's story, Tara's story that you just saw about Twitter, right? That whatever we have learned, maybe some part of that may be of value to somebody else, right? So don't curate yourself out of telling your own story.
Yeah.
Tell your story and then find out how it connects. And what you may find is that in sharing your story, someone else will share theirs, and there's where the connection comes from. So final push here on this slide. You can start out lurking. Karen just talked about that. She just watched for a long time. That's okay. I bet we know young children who watch before they jump in. I had 2 daughters who were lurkers. They wanted to engage, but they wouldn't engage till they really understood what the rules were and how it was going to work, right? That's okay. Then become a participant. So then you're in now. You're not just talking about Facebook, but you've got a page. You're kind of watching it. And then ultimately, of course, the highest order heroes become an active contributor. And so there's a little continuum there. We're giving you permission to lurk, just not for very long. We're giving you permission to just kind of participate a little, but not for very long. We're wanting you to get to the sweet spot of really being a connected educator, which means you're at the contribution level. You recognize that your story has value. You recognize that other teachers or educators you talk to have value to give back to you. Becoming a connected educator is the most impactful thing you can do in your career. I think we would agree with that. I think we do agree with that, or we wouldn't have posted it right there. Right there. We actually think this is not just a big idea. This is a really important step for all of us in the digital age. And there are others trying to figure the same things out that you're trying to figure out, and others who've actually already figured it out who you could learn from. So think about that. And we've had a little fun thinking about how this is we're really proponents of a connectivist approach for constructivists at heart. We like to build our own knowledge, and we think of the children who build their own knowledge in that framework, that's the best learning. Well, so how do you use connections to be really an even better and more effective constructivist?
And I think one thing, when Chip was talking about a new tool each month, one thing I had to do to get myself to be a lurker and participant, because I'm kind of a recovering perfectionist, as I shared with you. So I like to know that I'm going to be affirmed by what I share, but I couldn't be affirmed. So just making a quota for myself to say, once a month, I'm going to comment to this chat group. And just kind of, just like you would set kind of a goal or a statistics for yourself for participating or trying a new tech tool, I would say try to form one for yourself that works for you, that kind of pushes you to start participating.
Yeah, in my work in distance learning here at Erickson, we talk about voice and presence as our 2 highest order concepts with faculty who are going to teach online. The students need to hear your voice. They need to know what you care about, the passion in your voice, the commitment, the intellectual content that you have, right? So how do you do that? And then presence is the sense that in a virtual environment, you're here, right? And so I think when I see really effective social media folks, they have both. They've established their voice. We've tried really hard to establish a voice for the tech center in our space so that we can speak in a similar way and show our values in a similar way. But the idea of presence, too, is that you're there. And one of the ways that people know you're there is when you comment back to them, or you like what they posted, or you do something that creates this two-way. So think about how you want to establish your voice and presence personally and professionally. And I think that's an interesting way to kind of think about it. How do people know what I care about? Mm-hmm. So building digital citizenship is a subset of this, an important piece in this 21st century. We talked about it in the NAUIC position statement. Digital citizenship refers to the needs for adults and children to be responsible digital citizens through an understanding of the use, abuse, and misuse of tech, as well as the norms of appropriate, responsible, and ethical behaviors relating to online rights, roles, identity, safety, security, and communication. Well, that's a mouthful, but we've actually been talking about being a digital citizen in social media, right? It means that you understand what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, and when it's being misused. You understand appropriate behavior, responsible behavior, ethical behavior, and so we're starting to learn these things, but we didn't know what these things were related to social media 10 years ago because there wasn't an environment, right? So this is a dynamic space. It's changing. I think the point we care about most as you think about working with teachers who work with children and parents is the safety issue of digital citizenship, that as soon as you log into a social media, you're creating a digital footprint. When you post your child's just been born photo on your Facebook page, you're actually creating a digital footprint. So we need to be very mindful about that. There's times when I want everybody to know what I've been stomping around and know where my footprints have been, and other times when I want to be thoughtful about that. So this one takes some thinking. I think we're all still learning along the way. So it matters to us as it relates to teacher and parent involvement through dialogue, through questions, establishing guidelines for sharing and interactions. One of the things you're likely to hear from early childhood programs in Tennessee is, do we need a social media policy? Do we need policy for how you use digital devices and what you share and what you don't share? And so that's really at the front end of this whole conversation around a new set of rules and a new set of behaviors. Again, being aware of your digital footprint and the footprint you're creating for others along the way. Be a very critical consumer of information. I don't know if you remember that ad that used to be on TV where the person basically says, well, it was on the internet, as in, therefore, it's got to be the truth. I think we've matured a lot on that one. We understand that we've got to look for multiple sources of information. We've got to know who the source of information is ultimately. And so that notion, I think, is an important one. Being a good consumer is a big part of digital media literacy. How do I trust what I know? How do I get the right information? And that relates, again, to this appropriate sources of data. Amanda's put some organizations down the right side here that we follow and learn from, and that are taking the lead in helping us understand this new way of being a citizen in the 21st century. So, join us in those worlds and join us as we all learn how to do this better.
So we're going to now talk about the 4 M's. So we hinted on that. Now we're going to talk about that in more depth. So we're going to look at being a digital, for digital age educators, being managers, mediators, mentors, and makers. And so we're just going to go through the 4 M's and then give you some examples as well as a few tips to go along with that.
Just, Amanda, just stay for a moment. So take a look at the photos that are on the slide. They were curated and chosen intentionally. Right? What's going on? Well, I see an adult with more than one child in many cases. I see multiple people around one iPad, not everybody needing to have an iPad. I see this one down in the corner, a lesson being done to a whole group of kids around a table, right? And in the top left, Aaron, our friend, looking over the shoulder to see what's going on and kind of observing. So very interesting, I think, to think about what do we really mean by all of this, and what's the highest order. And we think the highest order is this notion of really engaging in joint engagement with kids in a classroom.
So first we're going to take a look at Aaron and Elise. I know you've seen videos in our first webinar as well as in our workshop, and they're going to talk about how they're choosing media in the classroom.
First of all, I kind of like to look at the technology before I use it in the classroom. So if there's an app that I want to use, I first need to get accustomed, and I first need to know what the app is and how to use it, so that when I bring it to the classroom, I can help my students kind of use the app and understand how it works, what they need to do, so that we can learn as much as we can from that app. I look first at what are we trying to do. So if we are doing an inquiry together and students need a way to be able to share something that they've learned, or they need to be able to research, then I look at, well, what's the best tool for being able to do that? So if we're doing a research on, let's say, apples, because it's the beginning of the year, so probably we'll be learning about apples in a few weeks. I ask them to go on Google, and okay, I say, let's write the word apples, let's see what's going to come up. So I will be sitting right next to them, so that we're not clicking random things or something that's not appropriate for them. But at the same time, I want to give them that freedom and that autonomy that they can choose what they want to learn. So I usually start with, what are we trying to do? And then think, what's the best tool or what's the best device to help my students be able to learn and to express themselves.
So you see from that video, they're giving you their reasons and a few things that resonate. One is that it's very intentional and thoughtful, and they're thinking about their overall goal of what they want to accomplish. And in our workshops, we talk about how these were pre-kindergarten teachers, but I spoke with toddlers, I spoke with school-age children, informal educators, and intentionality really resonates across the board, no matter what age group you're talking about when you're choosing the technology tools. Another key thing was that we were talking about digital citizenship and how we're helping, ourselves as well as professionals who are working with young children be able to navigate and find information. And I really like Elisa's comment about how she is sitting there right next to the child. So she's allowing the child the space and the children to be able to figure out and find what they're interested in, but also she's there with them to help them navigate so that they aren't clicking around and we're talking about inappropriate content. I mean, just being an involved, important other. She's an involved teacher, but as well as we would want parents to also be involved in that. So, Chip, did you have something?
Yeah, I did. There's two things that popped out at me. One was Elisa's advice to try it first. Before I'm going to try it with a child, I got to play with it myself. That's really bedrock stuff for us, and actually why your project in Tennessee is so compelling to us, because often what's missing in this entire conversation is professional development. And so teachers are given technology and no time or training of how to use it, and then we're all surprised when nothing interesting happens. And so I think that idea, that's now we're back to the play group and all of that, right? Mess around with this stuff first. If I want children to be playful with technology and media in the 21st century, they need teachers and adults who are playful with technology and media. We don't get there if we just get handed it as a task, right? And then I really liked what Erin said about, I think it over, I know what my goals are, and I'm looking for, is this the best tool? That may be as good advice as you're ever going to give anyone that you do training with, is that we know how to make those choices as early childhood educators. Technology might be the best tool. This time it might not. For this child it might not. For this content it might not. Or for this child it might absolutely be the way that we unlock something that we couldn't otherwise. So just that notion of really thinking it through and ultimately knowing that what you've got here is a tool for learning, and it's the adult's job to figure out how to use that well.
And as we were talking, we're both sharing our two different perspectives on the same content. I think this would be really interesting for when you're training teachers or families to play these videos. We have them on a text on our website, and instead of, sometimes having a video of someone else's voice helps to provoke that kind of change or that kind of insight that you're going for. So the idea of maybe playing one of these videos and saying, what did you notice about what the teachers were saying about selecting, and really having that conversation to help navigate them in using technology in their programs. So some tips for being a media manager. So be a good digital media role model, and enthusiastic tour guide, and follow the child. And I feel like Elisa's example and the example that Erin both gave were really great examples of how they were following what the children were interested in, but still being an active participant in that. Doing your homework. So Chip was saying before, Elise talked about learning the digital tool, having time to play, so that they already knew, and also finding ways of building your own digital media literacy so that you are fulfilling your professional knowledge so that you can help teachers and parents build their own. Being intentional, I feel like we've said that so many times, and we'll probably say it a few more times.
Oh, yeah.
But using developmentally appropriate practice, establishing the guidelines around select, using, integrating, evaluating digital tools and programs is really important and need to be carried over whether you're talking to parents or educators. Curating content, so as we talked about being a critical consumer of content, we want you to keep doing that kind of vet through your information, who your data source is, what is their background, what is their knowledge, what is their experience, so that when you're giving resources to parents and educators, that it's really thoughtful. And know when to say when. So connect the real with the virtual, making sure that it's an integrated experience, that it's not just, we were talking about this before, that we were talking about SoundBrush, and we were talking about that within the context of how if you use the app to learn, then it's not really meaningful, but really there are so many other pieces you need to think about the intentionality adult. We've talked about how it affords different features that wouldn't be available in other types of technologies or traditional sorts of tools that you would use in the classroom. So being very thoughtful and allowing that merge to happen.
Yeah, I'm just going to jump in on two things. One is intentional and intentionality, which we have said almost as much as digital media literacy. But as a teacher educator, I always consider that the highest order goal, and here's why. Well, there, why? Why is why. Because if you're intentional, you don't just know what to do with technology, you know why. You're making an intentional choice. You're making a decision based on what you know about the child and what you know about the tool. So really, we do hold that up as really important. And you don't get to be intentional right out of the box, right? You have to earn intentionality. It doesn't just come from academic preparation and learning about theory in a child development course. It comes from time with kids and time with all kinds of kids and time with the tools. So it's a lifetime pursuit, but the closer we get to really being able to articulate why. And then number 5, I think, is important because you are absolutely going to get asked about this. The know when to say when really kind of talks about, is this a screen time? Is there a limit? What's good? What's bad? You know, how do we decide what to use it or not use it? So we'll just offer you a simple answer to a very complicated question, but it's not, to us, it's not so much about how long someone is watching a screen. It's what they're doing while they're watching a screen, what the quality of the content is, what the level of the engagement is. Time is one metric, but it's not the only metric. But in education, and parents will ask you the same thing. We're always wondering, well, tell me, is it 15 minutes? Is it 20 minutes? Is it 13 minutes? Is it an hour? Right? People want you to quantify that, and we refuse. We just flat out won't do it because we don't believe that's actually the indicator. And for one child, 5 minutes and off and running might be plenty. For another child, deep level of engagement, and at 15 minutes, I'm not walking over and saying, well, that's it, your deep level of engagement with this content and device is over for the week. That doesn't make sense to us. So we know that there's lots of conversations going on. I just wanted to kind of jump in and add a little wrinkle to the know when to say when comment.
So this is another video that we have. So we have been showing you kind of pictures from Pacific University, the College of Education. They have a Child Learning and Development Center. And so this is, I'm very sensitive.
Yeah.
Sorry. So this is just one example of how they managed to use digital microscopes to be able to support inquiry in their classroom. So I just want to show you a few seconds.
This white stuff is like causing a big mystery.
How is it taking pictures and looking closely with your proscope helping you answer the questions that you had?
Ava, wait, I saw something black. Let me see. I got it.
See.
Whoa!
What is that? What do you see? Don't forget to take a picture of it. Ooh, right there.
Whoa.
What do you see, Tashitli?
With some shine.
What is happening to the pumpkins? They didn't used to look like this.
They're getting sick. It's right, just like right there. I saw something purple.
How come what you're seeing in here is white and what you're seeing in here is black and purple? Why is that? If the pumpkins are sick, why does one of them have white stuff on it and the other one has black stuff? Wow, that's really detailed. You can see the black part of the pumpkin that you were thinking is showing.
Look at that green. I mean the yellow.
Do you want to take a picture of it, Eva? So make sure you're recording, because scientists, as they go, they take pictures to record what they're observing and what they're noticing.
Take the picture.
So that's one example. I mean, we're both noticed so many different things about that. One is one, as we were talking about before, the microscope affords this different ability to be able to take pictures to really look and examine the mold that was happening. So we had Mark Bailey, who's the director of the Child Learning and Development Center, talk about that, and he was saying how they have pumpkins in their area and how they brought them in and just really used it as a form of investigation. And so as the pumpkins were like decomposing, they found that as a learning opportunity. And if you notice, the teacher asked a lot of questions, like, what did you notice? What's happening here? Why is this different? So she was helping to model that learning. So she wasn't just giving them digital microscopes and they were kind of having at it. There was a lot of thought and intentionality, and she was using words about when we're scientists do this. So very thoughtful about the construction. So when we're thinking about being a mediator, we saw that she allowed the students to be able to investigate, to look, to have their reactions, to say, ew, and like, what's that? But then she also brought it back to what the goal was and what the learning was and what she wanted them to do, which was very interesting.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, and she used scientific language, the language of inquiry, along the way. So she's modeling the process as well as the language that we use. I like the digital microscope because it fits one of my criteria for interest in use of technology, which is it allows you to do things you can't do without the technology. Now, yeah, you could look into a rotting pumpkin and see it, but the ability to really examine and take a picture and save it and all that, I think that's an example of putting a tool in a child's hands that is absolutely a tool for inquiry, for making sense out of their world, for figuring things out, and then empowering them to actually do that. And it wasn't the teacher who was holding the digital microscope. So I think that's great, and lots of examples of that from Mark's program at Pacific University, intentionally, right? These things are not happening just because they happen. They're happening because they really believe in the process and in preparing kids for a world in the 21st century where inquiries and finding the answer is going to be the real coin of the realm. Having answers used to be what was most important. In the 21st century, it's about knowing how to find them. So these kids are given powerful tools for finding answers. I love that.
So some tips for being a media mentor. So be a great media playmate and co-explore. So that was a great example of how the teacher was very involved. She was right there guiding the exploration, asking questions, just as interested in what was happening with the pumpkins as the students were, which was really amazing and enriching to watch. So being attuned and attentive and keeping it interactive and engaging and explorative, and inquiry is a really great way to do that, asking those questions, helping children navigate and asking those questions, and helping teachers figure out what are the questions that they should be asking is really crucial in your role. Matching the tools with the content and then matching that with the individual child. And we talked about this a little before, where we were talking about what is different, and we were talking about limits and with screen time or with technology, and that varies by the tool, it varies by the content, it varies by the child, but being able to help teachers find a way to guide their choices. Using the tools to enhance and extend the activities and promote pro-social behavior. That example was a really great, what they were using their microscope, of them working together, using it, investigating together. They were extending that inquiry experience and that learning. And so it was a blend of we were talking about the digital and the real world, that it was both. It was a mixture of both. It wasn't one or the other. And then also using tech to let children do something that they wouldn't have done without the technology, which is a great example of them taking pictures as they were doing that so they could save that for later and have further discussions.
Yeah, one of the things these devices do so well is allow children to revisit their work. So if you take a picture of the pumpkin and a week later you're wondering about the pumpkin, you can go back and look again. And I think that's really powerful. I just want to point out the photo in the lower right, just because there's something really fun happening in that photo. So the teacher and two kids are looking at the iPad and working on something together, but look at the little girl in the back. She's a media creator. She's taking a picture of them using technology, and by doing that, creating a new bit of media in that digital photo. So, you know, I think that picture is just loaded with interesting things. But that idea of kids as creators, we're going to come back to that as well. But I think that photo is a great example of this isn't that complicated. It isn't that hard to do. It's about having the right tools to do it with.
And then being a media mentor. So this is a video that we're not going to show you. It's from TEDx. It's from Lisa Guernsey, but she talks about media mentorship as well as the 3 C's in this particular example.
Yeah, the idea of media mentorship is really kind of taking root in lots of places, but in particular in those informal, again, there's that word, in those informal settings like libraries and museums, where the adult who works with young children in many ways has a very different opportunity to impact the child and the parent than we do as teachers in an early childhood program. And so the ability to model and to mentor how this can be used is really powerful in a library story time. A librarian who embraces or integrates or begins to use in interesting ways digital media and ebooks and other kinds of things has the chance to literally show parents how to do this. And we think that's really powerful. We're excited about this notion of mentorship because it's embedded so much in the way we think about teacher preparation and professional development. So we know what it means to have a mentor, but this idea of a media mentor I think is really, really rich. So what do we mean by this? Well, to be someone who guides the way, which means you have to know the way or know enough of the way to get started and then trust yourself to figure it out, right? There's that other moment. If we have to wait till we know it all, we won't get started. But maybe we need to know enough to get started and then we go. Again, this is kind of a circling back around, but this is at the core of our Erickson beliefs as well. Emphasize technology tools that encourage pro-social behaviors, interactions with others that become relationships, and this idea of joint media engagement at home and in the classroom, that what can happen when an adult and a child are at the media, and Amanda talked about this before, becomes a much different and richer experience than just the child. And we're not saying an adult has to be with a child all the time because that is impossible. It can't happen, right? But knowing when to come and go. And again, the picture in the bottom is our colleague Erin, who has this amazing ability to know when she needs to be somewhere, when she needs to join a conversation. And great teachers have that. It's almost the eyes in the back of the head kind of idea. They just are tuned in, and so they move that way. But again, mentoring to me is about showing how to use it and showing why. And so we again think you need to be this kind of M, and as do others. We want to help children progress from being consumers to creators, and I talked about that a little bit on the last slide of the photograph. Excuse me. That in fact it's not enough in the 21st century to just let media wash over you, to just watch TV. But now what can you do to create media that you can engage in, to lean in instead of lean back? I always like to pause at this point, one, for a drink, but two, to remind us that this is a continuum, and it doesn't mean you never consume media. It means that a higher order use is to become a creator. But I bet there's no one on this webinar, including the two of us sitting next to each other here, that hasn't had a moment where they've just consumed media. It's been a busy day at work. You come home, you turn on the TV, you turn on some music, and you're not putting anything into it. You're getting from it. That's okay, right? And now we're back to, when is enough, when to say when. What we're trying to nudge people toward is less and less of consuming media, particularly in formal and informal settings, and more creating. So, think of yourself along that pathway, which is where we're headed on the last M anyway. And then again, this idea of promoting digital media literacy, and we always say yours and theirs, and that theirs includes, in your case, includes other educators you're going to train. It includes the young children and the parents that they work with. In my work in teacher education and in the project that you're working on, I don't get to reach out and have a direct impact on kids. I'm not in the classroom with kids. But if I do my job well and give people good ideas and then they pass them along, and then ultimately a teacher like this becomes a true mentor for all of us about how to do this well, then that's where our effect is. But it's never a doubt in my mind who the ultimate consumer of our work is. It's the children. So we start with the children, and then we figure out how by getting to other adults. So it's kind of a bottom-up, top-down at the same time way of thinking about this.
And then thinking about media making, so we've talked about that. So I'm going to show you a short video. So this is from Maggie Power's website, who I shared information about her before. And in this one, she's using ChatterPix, which is one of the tools that we use at the training.
Oh, fun.
Hello, this is Eleanor. Happy Valentine's Day to Narzan. Hello, this is Ellie. Happy Valentine's Day to Zena. Hello, this is Alexander. Happy Valentine's Day to Andreas.
Awesome.
So I'm just showing you a few of those as an example, but to talk about that being a media maker, and we actually used in one of the groups were ChatterPix, but that whole idea of blending the traditional versus the real, they were connecting with other classrooms in a different country. Our colleague Maggie Powers is really big on global connection and global education, so that's really kind of embedded in her work. And so using that as a source of being able to connect and for children to be media creators and media makers and share their voice and have their perspective, and it also connects with the curriculum, enhances what the teacher's goals were already. So it's also that intentionality that went with using that tool.
We're going to go back to a word I said earlier, empowering or empowerment. How empowering is it for a child to create this, be able to share it with another child across the world, take it home, do it, send an email to their parents or whatever. Absolute media creation, right? We're not talking about coding and programming here. Lots of interest in coding and programming, and we're in that conversation, but we think that's for older kids, and there are ways for us to talk about that differently. But this is pure and simple media creation, and that we think that's so powerful for kids, and really gives them the chance to feel like they can make it, not just use it. We both would tell you we think that's core to 21st century readiness for school and success in life is that idea that I don't just use these things. I control them, I make them, I get them to do what I need it to do. Very powerful. Is this you? Is it me, Amanda?
Yeah.
It's me, right? Yeah, I bet you will. We've been doing that. So 5 tips for mindful media making or becoming a media maker. So explore ways to make media so that you can model and mentor children as media creators. So we've already given you the simple starting point, digital camera. You take a photograph in the classroom or a photograph of an activity, you post it online, or you show them the photograph, and then we have to be willing to put the camera in the hands of the kids to become creators. But this is not that complicated. That's kind of unfair in a way. This is a really big idea. We get that. But the maker movement and maker spaces and the interest we've got in messing with stuff and creating something new is all around us. And so what we're really wanting you to do is get excited about that and begin to think about ways you can model that. Again, back to this gentle nudge or a big nudge if you need one to move from consumer to adapter and creator. But again, it's not just move from one to the other. It's understanding that at various times and with new tools we play, all these roles are part of how we do it. It's kind of like the 5 E's that Amanda talked about before. There's aspects of all of this that are embedded in the way we use media. Start with something familiar. So again, digital photos and videos, record audio. Begin to use these open-ended storytelling apps like some of the ones that we have here and some that I bet you showed and played with in Tennessee. Create maker spaces, and so to me this is the beginning of it. You know what? You know how to do this. You created a maker space when you had a block corner. So maker space, and then you took it up a notch when you said, well, instead of just blocks, we'll add some other things, right? And so then that takes the play in another direction. So we know how to do this. And all we're saying is that there's an opportunity to do this in a way that really promotes and supports kids' 21st century learning. This idea of a tinkerer or scientist that I love, just messing around with stuff with no particular objective in the end, is a part of this. The other thing about makerspace that's important is we have to let go of there being this finished product that we expected when we began, or finished product that we thought the child was doing, and now what have you done instead? The what have you done instead is actually the heart of the maker. It's that you created something along the way, and you had intentionality yourself as the maker. So have a play. It's an expression that my colleagues in New Zealand use that I really like. Just have a play with this. Join the maker movement. Find out what's going on in your community, in your library, in your museum, around making and make and take kinds of ideas. Go take a look, go play, jump in and mess around a little bit there as well, because we think that's really going to pay off in the long run. So I talked earlier about the fact that none of us are digital age natives. We weren't born in the digital age, but every child that we're talking about and every child to come has been and will be. But we're analog. We're from the analog age. We came before all of this, so we have to acknowledge that that we have to know more. What you know right now, today, as you're listening to this, what your knowledge, your skills, and your experience with technology is, from the analog age is very valuable. It's just not sufficient. It's not enough, right? You're not starting with nothing. You're starting with all of that. But what else do we need to add? And that's really understanding what adding to that what you care about, what you're passionate about as an educator really provides this foundation for what we're calling digital age curation. And again, in my time in this work, in the early days of the internet as a tool for learning, the coin of the realm was to aggregate. If your website was the place to go to find out everything you needed to know about a particular topic, then you had the best website. Now the coin of the realm is curation. Now I actually want to know from the person who's collected everything on this topic, what are the 3 or 4 things that are most important, most valuable, that you think will most help me? And that's the moment of curation. Librarians know how to curate. Museum folks know how to curate. This is part of their DNA, but we think it's a fun thing for you to start to think about. And again, an empowering idea. And in fact, you curate every day. You do make choices related on what's best, what's most interesting, what's going to be most effective. And these words, select, use, integrate, and evaluate, come right out of the position statement and roll right off our tongue. But those, to us, that's the teaching process. Right, this idea that this is a circle, and so you select a piece of technology, you use it, you begin to integrate it into the curriculum beyond a standalone use, you evaluate how's it working or not working, what could we do differently, and you come back around. This is a process that we all do all the time. So reflect on what you know about child development and early learning. We know more than we think, and we have a foundational knowledge that's really valuable for this conversation. They're not disconnected. They need to be totally connected. Identify your own best practices with digital technology and media. What are you good at? You don't even have to be working with kids today to say, well, you know what I'm really good at, I really like to do, or I really find is most effective. Start to think about that. Focus on something, not on all of the above, but on something that really works for you, and then start to think about what are the applications of that. Apply developmentally appropriate practice. Well, again, this is kind of bedrock stuff. When we redid the position statement, it had last been updated in 1996, and we figured there wasn't going to be much of value in there for us writing about this in the digital age, but almost everything in there was of value because they had grounded in 1996 the use of technology, very different technology than today. They had grounded it in developmentally appropriate practice. Again, as a framework that teachers use to make choices and to know whether something's okay and what's best for a child. Follow the position statement, and I know Amanda shared that, and we've shared that with you. Really start to pull out the bits and pieces of this that you can hang your hat on and can understand. It's good work. It's important work. It's what we've got right now to provide principles and guidelines to help us move forward. What we're excited about and what we look forward to is this notion that in fact, teachers are creating the new best practices, and you've met Aaron and Yelise, and you've met others, that the teacher research that's going on, teachers who say, well, let me try it, and then tell us how it went, is really where so much of best practice is going to come from. The academic research will come. I'm sure Amanda's shared some of what we know based on research, but the research, the curve on and time on research to influence practice is so long that by the time we get the research on iPads, there won't be iPads, there'll be something else. So I'm not discounting the academic research and the need for it. I'm just saying we got to get busy, right? And trying to empower teachers to see themselves as researchers. And then this this little prompt that I always include on everything that I do around looking to Fred Rogers for what's interesting, and I'll come back to that. Hold that thought, and I'll come back to it near the end.
We are out of time. Are we close to being finished?
Yes, we're close to being finished.
Sorry,
Okay.
we had the wrong idea about time.
Yes. We'll just back up. So digital age curators. So these are just telling you some questions that we have that does media support the learning goals? Is it interactive, developmentally appropriate? Is it playful and hands-on, considering the physical environment, that joint idea of joint media engagement and collaboration, encouraging that digital and non-digital connection, using real-world examples, technology that's cost-effective, and evaluating its own use.
And these come out of a project in Pennsylvania that's doing great work, and again, I bet we've already given you the link to. We're just going to jump ahead. I apologize on both of our parts. We thought we had till 10:30, and so we were just having a great time moving along.
Well, I should have, yeah, a lot of times they're 90 minutes and we just have an hour, so.
That's fine. Okay, so we're done. Fred Rogers used to talk about what's essential is invisible to the eye from the Little Prince, and how important it was for all of us to identify the essential and visible, and we'll just leave you with this thought from Fred about being very mindful. No matter how helpful computers are as tools, and of course they can be very helpful tools, they don't begin to compare in significance to the teacher-child relationship, which is human and mutual. A computer can help you learn to spell hug, but it can never know the risk or the joy of actually giving or receiving one. So again, we'll leave you with that gentle thought from Fred Rogers about being mindful about your choices. And again, we're sorry we went a little over time, but glad you were here with us and could be part of the conversation.
Well, thank you. That is a great way to end, and you have really given me lots to think about. One of the things that I have written down on my notes is the idea to establish your voice and presence. I just think that's a powerful thought, and how you do that. So thank you for bringing up lots of things for us to think about, and I do appreciate your nudging and pushing, and for all of us to be advocates for technology and how we help child care providers and parents do that in appropriate ways. That is the intent for our post assignment, is that you start really thinking about putting together this training. And so if you have questions about how to do that, please call me. I'm here to help you brainstorm that, because I do think once we get away from this and we have lots of trainings that we're doing, if we haven't processed and thought through some of these things, when you go to make the training, you're going to feel like, I don't even know where to start. So the assignment is to help you to at least get started. Thank you, Chip and Amanda. And I just appreciate all of you out there, and I know that many of you are dealing with still very icy and